180 Markets Raise Day Zoom. Hang on one second. Those of you, you know the drill. On Raise Day, we always have management teams, and we are super excited today because we are joined by Chairman and CEO Tian Chu of Invion. We've had a number of interactions with Invion over the last 6 months, and pleasingly, they've all been very, very positive. But before we get into it with Tian, I just want to say a thank you very much to our joint lead managers, Evolution Capital, and in particular, Mendy Amzalek. Mendy, I think you're out there somewhere. Big thank you. But with that, Tian, welcome to our Zoom interview.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
Hey, Tian, you have a very, very strong financial background. In just a couple minutes, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I actually was on everyone else's side in my previous life. So I was actually at Goldman Sachs in New York and Hong Kong. I was on a principal investing desk, and we were given a lot of play money. We actually were able to invest in public and private situations, long, short. We initially focused on distress, special situations, went to growth capital, private equity, public equities, the whole gambit. So hopefully I'll be able to speak a similar language and identify with some of the concerns that the audience has as well.
Absolutely. And as you know, Tian, from your background, you know, when it comes to biotech, it's very easy to get lost into the total addressable market, you know, quagmire of, you know, you see billions and billions of dollars. And certainly Invion is in that area, you know, focusing on cancer. But what Sean and I also look for is something that's unique and also a company that has had clear momentum on the business side. And that is certainly what you have had on your cancer treatments. But before we get into those particular milestones, can you just tell us a little bit about Invion and how your photodynamic therapy is a little bit different than maybe what other people have out there?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. So unfortunately in cancer, it's the current modes of treatment that most people have are typically chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and surgery. Literally, they've been around for 100 years or more. And the first two tend to kind of destroy your immune system, which means that if you don't get rid of all the cancers, they come back and are much more aggressive and harder to treat. And what we have is a very different and novel approach, and we call it photodynamic therapy. And what that means is it essentially is a compound that you either inject or you put on your skin, and it very selectively accumulates in cancer cells, but not healthy cells. And then by itself, nothing happens. And the reason it's called photo is when you shine a certain frequency of light in it, it essentially creates an oxidative process. So oxygen-free radicals basically come out. And because they accumulated in the cancer cells, they kill just those cancer cells. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does is trigger an immune response. So your immune system can fight back. And that's the second mechanism. And in fact, that's what we announced, 28th of October, I think, where we did some, we were continuing our proof of concept work. We worked on some in vivo models, basically mouse models, where we had these mice that had their immune system intact. We implanted triple negative breast cancer into these mice. And triple negative breast cancer is very, very difficult to treat. It's normally chemo resistant, very difficult to treat, often metastasizes. And literally the tumor went away. Compared to our control group, it just went away. You can see the photos of it in the announcement. And what we also tried to do, we actually tried to reimplant the new tumor in those mice, and the tumor just wouldn't grow. And that's actually got quite significant implications because of the protective immunity. Now, these were basically on a relatively small population, but it's quite dramatic. And so we're extending and doing more work on that. And you'll hear about it as we have more results that come out on that. Hopefully that answers your question in a nutshell in terms of some of the activities and the method of activity that this treatment actually works on.
Yeah, it definitely does. But also, I think, you know, you brought up one quick critical point there, that not only was it destroying cells, but it also was helping stop the regeneration, because I don't particularly know exactly what the statistics are as far as regeneration of cancer. but certainly that's a major, major issue. And was that to you an upside surprise in those results?
Uh, I wouldn't say it's an ups. It's a pleasant outcome, and we'd always kind of felt that there was a good shot that this was the case. The reason for that is we'd actually treated, for example, mice with ovarian cancer, and after you treated it, we just observed that the tumor just got smaller and smaller, even though we'd no longer shine light on it. So something was happening, and it's quite likely to be the immune system. And so this is basically further validation of that. And we're going to do additional validation on top of that on this, because there are very limited options in terms of something that can actually help your body fight the cancer and identify the cancer. You've got these relatively new technologies and immunotherapy that do that, but they tend to be very, very targeted for certain types of people, and they do sometimes have these side effects. What we find quite promising is that we put a therapeutic dose in these mice. We put 100 times the therapeutic dose, and we couldn't see any toxicity or any issues from that side. So if you've got 100x difference between what is safe and non-toxic, between what you need to treat, that's a really good profile when you start getting into the clinic.
Yeah, I could see why you were so excited, I'm sure, when you saw those results, as were we. Tian, what are then the next steps? Can you just go through maybe like the next 6 to 12 months? What is Invion going to do?
Sure. Okay. So the next, so let's take it into a couple of buckets. The first bucket is our most sort of advanced stage, which is cancer. And we've done these proof of concepts over the next, let's say, 6 months or so. We want to be going into these, expanding on these proof of concept. So the the triple negative breast cancer is an example of what is a primary tumor. And we'll be doing more extensive tests on that to get more data on the immune response. We'll also be doing another model, which will be testing a metastatic model, which means where those cancers are spread. And so we'll be looking at additional proof of concept work that comes out. So that's the first piece. The second piece is really preparing for identifying which indications we're going to go to the clinical trials on. And we're currently in the process of talking to different clinicians and sort of figuring out which ones we're going to use. And obviously we have to do some preparations for those clinical trials. And so the second half of next year is the current target, is we would like to be initiating one or more clinical trials. And that's where people get excited. So that's on the cancer side. On the atherosclerosis and infectious disease side, which is a more recent sort of disease area for us, we're essentially going to be at a much earlier stage, where we're going to be doing a large number of different diseases and doing very early stage discovery work, which means that, it's kind of like, it's like a, I don't know, you spray and pray, but it's kind of like doing a venture capital investment versus doing a very late stage investment. You've got to diversify, you've got to look at the early stage, and the outcome of that over the next 6 to 12 months, hopefully, is for us to identify a small number of target indications that we can start focusing and doing more proof of concept and ultimately more development work on.
Yeah. Tian, there was a lot there, and maybe just to go back into the, preparing for indications for clinical trials, how do you focus on a certain area where you're almost like spoiled for choice because there's so many different types of cancers out there? How do you focus a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're looking at more than one, but more than one could mean two, and it's really there's so many factors that come into it, and that's why we haven't announced like which indications, because we're still going through the thinking ourselves. One of them is obviously how big is the market. The other one is how fast can you get results. So if you do a trial where it takes 12 to 18 months to figure out your endpoint in your study, then it's going to be a long, long time before you get any results. There are some indications which are much faster to see results in, and so you can structure trials that are a bit shorter. If you're thinking about also registration, if you're trying to go for a mainstream cancer, you need large population, you need large dollars. It takes a really, really long time. And in Australia, you may have limited populations. However, there are accelerated paths to registration on getting things approved and into the market on what they call orphan indications. And so these are really difficult to treat. They don't have really good existing alternatives. It's a small population that has these diseases. And because of that, you can get an accelerated path to approval. Now, for the markets people, accelerated means, yeah, is it going to be happening in 2 hours? Okay, that's not how it works in this game. It's actually a very long multi-year thing. And, but it is the way we think about it. But it doesn't mean that we do 1 or 2 indications and stop. It's really around sort of when do we start the horse running? And then hopefully we'll have a multi-horse race so that there's a little bit of diversification there. Because you never know with with life and with trials and things like that. You want to basically make sure you've got more than one roll of the dice.
Right, absolutely. And then Tim, all these trials and efforts, they take money, and that's obviously what we're doing today is to providing you with that balance sheet to take advantage. Can you just, in a nutshell, give people the uses of the funds over the next year?
Yeah, so the use of the funds is we're looking to expand our territories for cancer beyond just Australia and New Zealand. And so the deal there is about 5 million would be used to acquire that new license. And the quid pro quo of that is that we as Invion would need to fund the clinical trials and the preclinical work in those markets. Now, the good news for us is we can piggyback off all the work that's been done to date and will continue to be done out of Australia and New Zealand, which is actually funded by the Cho Group. So we actually haven't paid for it. We kind of de-risked a lot of the work already. And we may well have some results we have results already, but from clinical trials, etc. And we just piggyback them, bring them to the new markets and go faster to trials and maybe to later stage trials. So that's the real benefit of us is we really have de-risked the time we have to spend to do the clinical trials. We've hopefully de-risked quite substantially. And on top of that, we spend less money in each market because a lot of the work's already been done. So, and paid for by someone else.
Tim, can you talk to us about the relationship with RMW and also the
Cho Group?
Absolutely, yeah. So the Cho Group or RMW, it's basically the same founder. They actually invented this technology and many years ago, and so they're the ones that have essentially licensed that technology to Invion, and they've been working on it for about 15-20 years now, and it came from essentially an entrepreneur who basically invested in some Russian scientists and then started just getting involved and then eventually became a scientist himself and invented this technology and really developed and built it and continues to do so. He's actually our R&D manager and head. So we continue to do that. Now,
so how will they work with the funding? Like, do they put in some, how are they funding it?
Well, how are they funding it? Well, I mean, the Cho Group's got its own sources of funding, and the chairman, Michael Cho, was actually quite a successful entrepreneur back in the day, in the previous millennium, and so he made his own money. So he's funded, in fact, all the cancer work to date, including the millions that have been funded into Invion, have been fully funded by him. So that will continue for anything done in Australia and New Zealand, but not anything done in these new territories in Asia Pacific that pretty much is the region excluding China, Japan, Korea.
Right, but it's fair to say that he's definitely very, very committed.
He is committed. Basically, this is his number one priority and objective in life. I can assure he's had plenty of people tell him over the past, "Why are you doing this? Why do you keep doing this?" He's never wavered. This is his dream, and this is something that he's fully committed to.
Yeah, and look, we're already getting strong results. Friends, we try to keep these interviews pretty short on Raise Day, and Tian, we know you're very busy. Jake, can you maybe open it up for questions at this point?
Yeah, sure. So anyone that has questions, either email the info account, ask them in the chat, or send Ariella, Greg, Sean, and myself a text.
Hang on 1 second. I'm just going to read this out here from Alan. Wait.
Just regarding the IP position.
Yep, sure thing. So the IP is owned by RMW Cho Group, and that's the global owner of the IP. What they've done is, and actually the Cho Group is actually one of the significant shareholders in Invion, and that was part of the original deal. And in exchange for that shareholding, it granted Invion the license for all users of Photosoft in Australia and New Zealand. So essentially, like, I'm sorry, you were going to say, Greg?
No, carry on.
Okay, yep. So for any disease, any area, any usage of the technology in Australia and New Zealand, that all belongs to Invion. Now, if we start with atherosclerosis and infectious diseases, we have the right to develop that asset in Asia Pacific, excluding Greater China. And in that model, instead of the Cho Group funding 100%, they will fund 75% of the preclinical work and 25% of the clinical work for those disease areas. And so it's more of a joint venture. Going back to your question, Greg, about use of funds. So the good thing for us is preclinical is much earlier stage. That's the high risk stage, and they're funding 3/4 of it. Clinical is when you've hopefully done a lot of de-risking and you're going to get faster to nearer term results. And to be fair, we get the benefit of this territory, so we should fork up the majority of it. So that's kind of the deal, and that's where the need for capital over the next period of time will be. Don't know if that helps answer your question.
Yep, I think it's
so actually, I've still got, so the first 5 was really for that license for cancer in Asia. The second 5 is essentially we need to have some capital to start perhaps preclinical work and maybe some of the early stage clinical trials and maybe some of these new markets. And the third 5 is essentially for general working capital. And we also want to top up the budget we already have for atherosclerosis and infectious disease.
Hey, Tien, I'm getting another question. Someone's just WhatsApping me. Given the results in October 28th, did that change the whole business model of how you're approaching the next set of trials?
Not really. I mean, it's well, it maybe helps us, but I mean, it's part of the journey. We need to get really confident in what and where the where the photosensitizer, where the INV043 accumulated, it tended to accumulate in the peritoneal cavity, and in the lungs. So where the tummy is, you've got the liver, you've got the pancreas, you've got those. So all those organs had a lot of photosensitizer, which concentrated in tumor deposits. So that helps us target which indications we want to look at. So it does help us on that side. But it's part of a journey of getting to the clinic. You need to do your preclinical work. You need to prove it actually works. You have to prove that it's safe in animals, more than one species of animal. You gotta start making sure the compound is made in a consistent way and has good characterization. And then you start these early stage clinical trials, and then you move to the next stage. So it's all part of the process and a journey that we look at.
Right.
Tien, yeah, I've got a couple of questions in the chat. Sorry, Greg, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to say the exact same thing. Go for it.
No problem. Yeah, a couple of questions that are a bit down the line, but definitely worth asking nonetheless. Firstly, do you plan to obtain FDA approval in the US?
Well, right now, our territory does not include the US. So that's not really an issue that Invion is concerned about. It may be something RMW is concerned about, but that's not who we are at the moment. So yeah, but what we do want to do from the work we're doing here is make sure that we can plug and play a little bit more, and we don't have to reinvent and repeat the wheel as much as possible. So, given that RMW is funding the cancer development program, I'm sure it's not lost on them that you don't want to sort of say, oh, maybe we should have thought of that when we did this work in Australia. But again, I can't speak for RMW.
But Tim, and this is just me following up, it's fair to say any results that take place, they can be carried out worldwide because obviously, cancer knows no boundaries per se.
Mostly what you're saying is right. So if you've got really good results and you're using the same drug, then, and also if you've got well-controlled and reputable well-controlled trials, then you can. But you do have these, every jurisdiction's got its own unique needs, et cetera. And so, sometimes you do need to do bridging studies, and you need to sort of adjust certain things. And also every study's got a slightly different structure. They may be measuring slightly different endpoints, for example. And so even though you may be looking at breast cancer, maybe one trial is looking at just getting rid of the tumor. Maybe another trial is trying to understand whether the cancers that have spread are actually are being addressed. That's two different trials, two different endpoints, two different measures. And depending on the objective, someone in the US looks at one and says, well, that's not relevant to the other one you're trying to do. There are nuances there. In addition to obviously regulatory differences, which is actually one of the real benefits of Australia to do early stage clinical trials. It's much more friendly to develop to first in human trials in Australia, which is great.
I wanted to ask a question that I've just been sent. So what is the commercialization plan with a collaboration with a big pharma company, and would it be a royalty agreement?
It's a good question. It's unfortunately I don't have that crystal ball, but the key thing here is we're working with really top tier institutions like the Hudson Institute of Medical Research, the Peter MacCallum Cancer Center, and we're building up data. We're building up reliable data. And part of the reason, if you've even noticed the announcements with these disgusting pictures of, mice and lots of details that probably aren't too user-friendly, those announcements aren't really just designed for, the average guy on the street, but it's to start the journey of communicating what we're doing to perhaps, slightly more institutional type of people. I'm not expecting anything happening anytime soon. But with anything, particularly those that in the audience that have done private market stuff, people don't decide straight away. It takes a long time. And so I just want to start everyone on the journey and then just keep moving along. And then whenever they feel like coming on board, they'll come on board. What that also means, to answer your question, is it's really hard to predict, what our exit is. But typically in biotechs, you can either continue to be a listed company that grows, you could either sell to big pharma, you could license this. There's lots of different exit points. The options there are not that similar to other biotech companies.
Right.
Right, thanks.
Okay, I think that we're going to wrap it up now just to keep it short for Tian. Everybody, if you have any other questions, just send them all our way. We'll get answered as best we can, relay it to Tian. And with that, thank you very much, everybody.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Tian.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks.